Hello, my name is Christine Marie Eberle, and my favorite thing is fire sirens.
Welcome to the Finding Favorites podcast, where we explore your favorite things without using an algorithm. Here's your host, Leah Jones.
Hello and welcome to Finding Favorites. I'm your host, Leah Jones, and this is the podcast where we learn about people's favorite things without using an algorithm. Today I am whispering to you from a discount tire in Mishawaka, Indiana, somewhere between Chicago and Cleveland, where I was able to safely get when my tire that has been a slow leak for many months went very quickly from 33 psi to 26 to 12 to 7, and then I got to a gas station, refilled it, and then in the 1 mile to get to a Costco went from 33 to 7. So I am now at a discount tire where they happen to have 2 tires that will fit my car, which means I can get to the wedding I am going to. Unfortunately, it means I'm going to miss the rehearsal dinner, but I thought I would take advantage of the time in their cool air-conditioned store to edit this weekend's podcast. Last week was a whirlwind. I went to Boston for 2 Doughboys live shows. As you know, the Doughboys Boston shows were kind of my emotional carrot to get me through chemotherapy. And they were canceled in January, but I went out anyway. And I had a great time. The shows were outstanding. Meeting Doughboys fans was so much fun. Getting to sit in an outdoor beer garden and go to food trucks was an absolute blast. But it definitely felt risky. I'm double vaxxed, double boosted. I was pretty good with my mask, but not 100%. Kind of by the end of Saturday, I sort of gave up, which is what the exhaustion of this pandemic does to us, I think. So my plan this weekend was to go to a wedding in Ohio, drive back bright and early Sunday morning for the Chicago show at the Vic with Nicole Byer as the guest. So excited. But unfortunately, one of the hosts of the Doughboys came down with COVID after the Boston weekend. So the Chicago show's trip is canceled, which means I get a more relaxed drive home on Sunday. But also puts me on even higher alert. I brought some home tests with me, so I'll make sure that before I go to the wedding tomorrow that I've got a negative rapid test. No symptoms for me, thankfully. So with that, I'm going to quit whispering in the corner of this discount tire and let you enjoy this week's episode with author Christine Eberle. In the meantime, wash your hands, wear your mask, get your booster shots, and keep enjoying your favorite things.
Hello and welcome to Finding Favorites. I'm your host, Leah Jones, and this is the podcast where we learn about people's favorite things and get recommendations without using an algorithm. I am joined today by an author. Her name is Christine Eberle. Her latest book, Finding God Abiding, comes out June 7th, 2022 from one of our favorite publishers, Woodhull Press. And you can pre-order the book now, and we're going to learn a bit about the book and about Christine's path to writing this book. Christine, how are you doing this afternoon?
I am doing very well, Leah. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining me. So, where are you? I know you're in your hallway.
Yes,
but
indeed.
where in the world are you sitting today?
My hallway studio is in my home in Elkins Park, Pennsylvania, which is just outside Philadelphia.
Okay. I have maybe driven by. I've done a couple trips where I've driven to New York and back, so
okay.
I feel like I guess that goes like
close
north
enough.
of Philly. But are you always from Philadelphia? I am working on my caffeine levels. Are you from Philadelphia?
I am a Philly area girl, born and bred. I've lived in Richmond, Virginia. I went to grad school in Boston. I've lived in New Jersey. But yes, I'm a Philly girl.
Great. Great.
And actually, if you've seen Mayor of Easttown, I'm actually a Delaware County girl, but we don't all talk like that.
Did you ever talk like that?
I don't think I did. I was raised by two teachers, and I think proper pronunciation was a very important part of my growing up. So,
yeah, fair. I am from Indiana, but like a part of Indiana, my understanding was like we had the ideal broadcast accent.
Yes, basic American Midwest.
Yes. So I never thought I had an accent, but there are certainly times where I've lived different areas in the U.S. where people are like, wow, your accent. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, now that you say that, it does come out every once in a while. I remember when the reason I was in Richmond is that I was working in a house of hospitality for homeless people. And I was the administrative assistant in the morning. And then in the afternoon, I worked the laundry and shower area.
Okay.
And I would ask these Southern guys, like, if they needed a tail.
Okay.
Towel, tail. And they'd be like, a what? So...
yeah.
Every once in a while.
Yeah. And how is is it spring for you yet? Are you starting to feel it a little?
The trees are beautiful. So on the day that we are recording, we have cherry trees in blossom and hail.
Everybody's favorite combination.
There is white stuff coming down everywhere. And is it flower petals or is it hail?
Yeah.
Both. So today's an odd day, but it's getting better this week, I understand.
Oh, good. Good. Do you have so you've got your book launch coming up at the beginning of the summer. Do you have any adventures planned for the summer or for the launch that you're looking forward to?
Well, I am looking forward to launch season in general, much more than, I say there's like the several seasons of book writing. There's writing season and editing season and launch season, but in the middle there is marketing season. So this is my least favorite of those seasons. So thank you for making it easier for me by our lovely conversation. So once we get into launch season, there will be a number of events close to home, working on setting up a couple things via Zoom, including I'm really hoping to set up at least one Zoom conversation with an author I really enjoy, friend/author that I really enjoy. But the thing I'm most excited about right now is I have a friend, a dear old friend who is a Jesuit priest and who resides right now at Georgetown in D.C., and so he has offered to throw a book launch soiree at his house, his very large Jesuit residence in Georgetown.
Yes.
So it's going to be, I love DC and almost never get there, but I certainly know a number of people down there. And so to really kind of take it on the road is going to be fun. I'm looking forward to that.
That is really going to be fun.
Yes. We're also trying to suss out the COVID restrictions. Because on pub day, we have a party planned, just a, family and friends, close friends party planned for a local venue that can ordinarily accommodate 50 people, which is perfect, but the current COVID restriction is 30.
Okay.
Is that going to lift by June 7th? I hope so.
Yeah.
So just, playing a little game of chicken with the launch party.
Yeah.
So, COVID chicken.
COVID chicken. I've been playing that a lot lately. Chicago has officially lifted restrictions, but venue by venue, it's different. So I went to the Goodman Theater this week to see a wonderful play called Goodnight Oscar. It's with Sean Hayes, who was on Will and Grace.
Oh, yeah.
And it's about Oscar Levant. And one night when Oscar Levant was on a legendary evening that he was on the Jack Parr show. And the Goodman is still checking Vax cards, and they closed their bars and masks on the whole show. So that's really nice. So they're selling out the house, but it is masks on, and that they will remove people who take them off. Nice. Yeah. So I appreciated that.
Just last weekend, we went in town here to see A Man for All Seasons. And actually, my most recent blog post as of this recording is about how we had to take the subway instead of the train because I couldn't find my phone, which would have been fine. I'm not that attached to my phone, but it has my train pass and my vaccine card.
Oh, no.
And so there was going to be no, getting on the train. And as it turned out, no getting into the theater, which I did not have on my mind. But if we had gotten all the way to the doors and I had been turned away, that would have been truly tragic. So
yeah,
took the time to find my phone and took the subway instead of the commuter rail.
Good.
Isn't it nice that there are multiple ways to the city?
Yes. Yeah, I am looking forward to being back on public transportation here. So I am currently in a recovery from cancer treatment. And so my walking, I don't have the stamina yet to walk to the train.
I was just listening to your last podcast and heard you say that. And I'm sure that'll be a wonderful day when you can do that.
Yes.
Bit of normalcy again.
I can't wait. I am also going to Israel in July. And my goal for that is to be able to walk under my own power from Jaffa Gate to the Western Wall. I'm fine taking rests. I'll take a stool with me. But I'm really hopeful that I'll be strong enough by then to do that sort of touristing.
Yeah. Oh, I really hope you are.
Yeah. So one of the things I think is really interesting to talk about is, and you called them seasons, writing season and editing season. Where did they fall in the lockdown, the pandemic for you? Was this a pre-pandemic book that you've held until now?
No, actually. So my first book, Finding God in Ordinary Time, came out in September of 2018.
Okay.
And I had this dream of making a shift from my full-time career in campus ministry and higher education to this freelance existence. And I really was hoping to make the shift when I was 54. I called it Plan 54. And indeed, I turned 54 in July of 2019 and stepped down from my job at the end of the month. So I started this freelance existence just a handful of months before the pandemic and wound up very much writing this book in pandemic.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think it went to my editor. It went to my beta readers in January of 2021. So pretty much the 9 months of 2020 COVID was book writing season for me.
Okay. So your season of writing was also pre-vaccine COVID.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So what better to do than stay home and write a book and
absolutely
give retreats via Zoom? Who knew that was a thing?
Yeah. We have all learned so many technical skills during COVID, or many of us have learned technical skills of what can be done remotely. And I was during the kind of the pre-vaccine time president at my synagogue. On the team making decisions about when to close our physical doors, not our community, but our physical doors. And then just figuring it out. Like, how do you do services?
Yep.
What do you do when you don't have a prayer book? It was a lot. We learned a lot.
Yes. I am a cantor in my church, which is not exactly the same role as in your synagogue, but the leader of song. And so I was one of a very small number of people who continued to go in during the pandemic to record a service, with just, me and the piano player and the priest and like a congregant.
Yeah.
So that was a chunk at the beginning.
Yeah.
One of the gifts buried in the pandemic and our expanding use of technology is how many more people we are able to reach now, and people who needed reaching.
Yep.
Like I did. So in that first pandemic spring, I gave a number of Lent retreats via Zoom. And so one of the people who came was an alum of mine who now has had at the time a 6-month-old baby girl. Mm-hmm. Now, she said, like, I'm going to join you. I'm going to say hello. I'm going to introduce the baby. I'm going to turn my camera off. I'm going to turn my microphone off. And I'm going to put her to bed while attending this retreat. I mean, I could have gone to her own church right down the street, and she could not have come at 7 o'clock on a Tuesday night.
Yep.
Another retreat in that same season, someone attended quite obviously from a hospital bed in her home. Like just the ability to reach people like that, I feel like it's helped us sort of widen the circle, which is good.
I agree. We saw families make new traditions where Friday night services are difficult because no matter the time and I'm in a Reformed congregation. So if you were in an Orthodox congregation, Friday night services that the men attend might be like at 5 p.m. and they're short, they're fast. It's like get in, get out, go to dinner. But in a more liberal congregation, it needs to be after the workday with some commuting time built in. And so we had families that were suddenly able to tune into services and also have Shabbat dinner at the same time or be cooking Shabbat dinner while attending services. We had people who could never get in from the suburbs. We had snowbirds able to join services, college students who were able to come home for services. And we also found that our families with kids that just weren't able yet to sit through services, the ability to attend as a family, but let their kids be more comfortable in a space in home, was really powerful. So I think it really opening the doors in that way, I think was so important for our congregation.
Yeah, that is really good. I know one of the things that I found very moving, the very first Zoom retreat I did, there were people from Washington State and California and the Philadelphia area and Northern Ireland for a 2-hour retreat. And it was hosted by a retreat center in Washington State. Now, no matter how good a retreat it was, they wouldn't have flown me out to the West Coast for a 2-hour retreat. And no one would have come from Ireland for it, So, there's goodness buried in there when you look for it.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit. We're going to talk more in depth about one of the chapters, but let's talk a little bit more broadly about this book. So it's called Finding God Abiding. It's daily meditations. Now, is this daily meditations? It's a 365 meditation a day sort of thing, or is it?
It's only 4 weeks. So it's 4 weeks of daily. Each of my 2 books is 4 weeks of daily meditations based on true stories.
Okay.
So both it's 4 sections. There's 7 chapters per section. So certainly someone could do it, as a month-long sort of little mini morning retreat or something. Maybe if I write 12 of them, eventually we can make it be a year.
Well, then you'll sell a box set. There
you go.
I don't want to commit you to 10 more books, but.
Well, and I don't mind writing 10 more books, but 28. Not that I wouldn't even have 280 more stories in me, but my family and friends are going to get really nervous if I keep going on this true story thing. So I'm going to keep writing, but we're going to shift a little bit. But
that's fair.
Yeah. So in this one, I decided to do a companion volume because I knew I still had stories that I wanted to tell, and that doing something else in this format made a lot of sense for the second time round.
Okay. So is Finding God in Ordinary Time, which is your first one, is that also a 28-day?
It is.
Like a 4 week, or is that one a little bit, that a different length?
That's 4 weeks as well. Yeah.
Great.
So, okay, can I tell you the funny backstory?
Yes, please.
All right. So Finding God in Ordinary Time, I started working on that probably people say, how long did it take you to write? I say 9 months. Well, 9 years and 9 months. Mm-hmm. Because I started it. I had a friend who worked for a publisher who said, I know you have a book in you. Come on, what is it? And I pitched him essentially this book and the first book and started to work on it. And I'd gotten a bit in when, for reasons having nothing to do with his own wonder and goodness, his firm let him go. Mm. And he passed on the project. The woman he passed it on to said, I like everything you've sent me, but I have no idea how to market this thing.
Yeah.
And frankly, I wasn't all that excited about working with the people who had just fired my friend.
Sure.
So I just put it in a drawer. Mm-hmm. And okay, let me get my timeline straight. In the winter of 2016 into 2017 was when I began to sort of get this itch about doing something else kind of next. Mm-hmm. And honestly, a coworker of mine had announced her intention to leave her job in the middle of the year because her beloved was in Germany and she couldn't be without him. Mm-hmm. And I reacted badly and came home and ran on the treadmill for quite some time and woke up in the next morning thinking, I don't have to stay here forever. Mm-hmm. If she can leave in pursuit of her dream, why do I feel like I have to stay and hold this thing together with duct tape forever? Mm-hmm. And it was okay, you're going to delete the thing about the duct tape because it was a wonderful school and, an office where I worked. But I knew that I wanted to do more of what I really wanted to do.
Sure.
And so that's what sort of planted the seed. So I had really no sooner had that insight than I got an invitation from a local retreat center sponsored by the Sisters of Mercy, for whom I also worked, for a 24-hour retreat called New Life Directions for Women Over 50. And I was 51. Mm-hmm. And it was 24 hours in September. And nobody takes off from a higher ed job in September.
No.
But I emailed it to my boss and I was like, please? And she was like, obviously, go. And so they had us do a vision board near the end. And at the very last thing we did was we had to say, what is one thing we can do in the next 2 weeks to move our dream forward? Mm-hmm. It's a very lovely question. And I had been keeping a list on my phone of what I called wisdom figures, people who were doing the sorts of things I wanted to do that I couldn't really envision how to get from here to there. And I said, okay, in the next 2 weeks, I can reach out to 2 of those people and get a get-together on the calendar. Mm-hmm. Not that we're going to see each other in the next 2 weeks, but at least in the next 2 weeks, we will put something on the calendar. So the first person that I had beer and pizza with was Liz Small, who at the time was running her own business called Small Steps, Big Benefits. Very handy last name she had. Mm-hmm. And in December, she forwarded me a Facebook sweepstakes she had spotted for a writer's retreat in Vermont called When Words Count. And mm-hmm. the sweepstakes was to win 4 nights, 5 days, I think, at this writer's retreat. And so I entered and won, as did many people, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. But here I was going to have 5 whole days in Vermont and a really long train ride, I think. Oh no, I wound up going with a friend, but 5 days in Vermont to work on some piece of writing. And I thought, okay, I'm going to pull this thing out of the drawer. And it was designed as 4 weeks of daily meditations. This woman couldn't figure out how to market it. You know what else is 4 weeks? The Catholic liturgical season of Advent. It's my favorite liturgical season. Everybody likes a nice little Advent prayer resource. Mm-hmm. I'm only 9 chapters in. So I brought with me, my readings and my lectionary and my sacramentary and my other Advent resources. And I schlepped all these books up with me. And I was going to find a way to convert this thing. So at When Words Count, you work during the day and you get fed these mm-hmm. marvelous meals. And then in the evening, you gather around the fireplace, weather permitting, and read passages to one another and get critique mm-hmm. and all that. And so I gave that whole explanation that I just gave you, and I read a chapter, and the group was like, Advent resource, really? We're not sure about that.
Okay.
Now, this was not a religious retreat. This group had a Quaker, a Hindu father and daughter, a former Catholic, sort of an evangelical Christian, and what did Steve call himself? An agnostic Jew.
Yep.
Okay. So this whole group, nobody currently in my own tradition gathered around, and they're saying not an Advent resource. And I was like, and in my, inside voice, I'm thinking, what do you people know about this? But okay. So, well, can I read you one more chapter? So I read one more chapter, slightly riskier chapter, and they were like, nope, not an Advent resource. I was like, okay, you've got to tell me. Like, why not?
Yeah.
And they said, if this is an Advent resource, it is going to be for sale in tiny Catholic bookshops where people like us will never find it.
Yep.
It's like, oh. So they really were encouraging me, like, write this for a broader audience.
Yeah.
And Steve Eisner, who, founded When Words Count, he said, you got to decide if this is fish or fowl. Like, decide who your audience is. Mm-hmm. And write for them. And so I, stayed up really late one night wrestling with that question, and came back the next day, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna believe you people, that this is the direction I should go. I said, but like, it was going to be called Finding God in Advent, and I'll talk about the Finding God thing in a minute. But I said, but like, if it's not an Advent resource anymore, what am I going to call it? Finding God in Ordinary Time. Uh-huh. So that was a joke. Yep. And now it's the title of my first book.
Sometimes the jokes stick.
Yep.
I do Shabbat. I've got a group now. It's been at least 10 years that we've been once a month having a meal together and doing services. And when we first started, I went to a conference on like how to start an independent minyan. And I was like, just put us down as TBD from Chicago. And so we're TBD Minyan. We've been TBD Minyan for 10 years.
Oh, how delightful.
Because I was like, I'm going to start a Minyan. And then we shove some Hebrew words around it, Tiferet Bamikdash, but we never call it that. It's just TBD. And so sometimes the joke sticks and becomes very meaningful.
Yeah, there you go. And so there's a lot of there's a couple of winks buried in the title of that book. The Finding God. So I'm Roman Catholic. My spirituality tradition is the Ignatian tradition. So St. Ignatius of Loyola, founder of the Jesuits. And St. Ignatius said that we could find God in all things. So finding God is like huge Jesuit code language.
Okay.
Like, so if you are raised and steeped in that tradition, like finding God is going to
recognize that it's for you.
Exactly. It's going to make your little antenna pop up. However, if you're not, they're just two perfectly understandable English words.
Yep.
Ordinary time is a Catholic liturgical season. So if you're Catholic, you'll recognize
like if it's not
that.
Advent or Lent, it's ordinary time.
Exactly. We got Advent, Christmas, Lent, Easter, ordinary time.
Okay.
Which is most of the year. And so, and I say in the intro, like literally as well as liturgically, most of our days are spent in ordinary time because it is also two perfectly understandable English words. Like, we know life has like some real highs, some real lows. Most of it is mundane. Yeah. So that's where that whole thing came from. So then the companion volume, that's how the companion volume got to be called Finding God Abiding. What
is the secret Jesuit meaning of abiding mean?
There is none.
Oh, okay.
It's just a word.
Okay. But it makes it clear that it is a companion piece, that they go together.
Yes, and the covers, the covers, God bless my cover designer, because I said to Asha Hossein, she's wonderful, I said, could you design a cover that is just like the first one, only different? Because we wanted it to be recognizably a companion volume and yet clearly something different. So she did a really good job of that, and she did us another cover that is very different, that I was like, okay, I can't use this because it doesn't shout companion volume, but please don't give it to anyone else because I would like it to be my next cover.
Yes.
Hold on to that for me.
Yeah. So we will link to this in the show notes, but Finding God Abiding is two beautiful, they're poppies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then Finding God in Ordinary Times is it a hyacinth?
It's
No.
I think it's a hyacinth, but it's a hummingbird.
And a hummingbird.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, stunning. They're both just beautiful.
Yeah, she did a marvelous job. And a lot of back and forth on Once Upon a Time, there was like a little bee up in the corner, but I didn't like the bee. And we, the word abiding, you maybe can see, is written in a handwriting font.
Yes.
Which is actually my handwriting.
Ooh.
Because we went through so many fonts and I was like, I don't like that. I don't like that. And I took the many possibilities over to my dear friend Rose Duffy. I took it to her house and I was like, look at these. Like, please help me pick one. And she's like, I don't like any of them either. But you have nice handwriting. Why don't you write it?
Mm-hmm.
And again,
Great.
just like, what am I going to call it? Like that. Okay. I went home and Asha liked the idea and I wrote the word abiding probably 200 times in different pens, different thicknesses of Sharpie, and she picked one she liked. So there it is.
How wonderful. What we're going to go into a little bit deeper now that we've talked about the seasons of writing and the retreat is fire sirens, which you had put down as your favorite thing. And and you said that there is in fact a chapter about it. So how about you read that chapter and then we'll dive into the idea even more.
Sure. Okay. So here you go. So just a tiny bit more background on the book. So it's 4 weeks of daily meditations based on true stories. Every one starts with a little scripture quote and then a true story that segues into some musing on lessons learned and ends with a couple questions for personal reflection. I joke that really these are like little daily mass homilies or sermons because they're, 5 minutes. But, no one needs to know that. Except now I just said it on a podcast. So, okay. So this is chapter 4, which is called Finding God in a Fire Siren. And the scripture quote that kicks it off is from Luke chapter 11. The disciples say, Lord, teach us to pray. There's no reason for them to blow that siren anymore, my neighbor insisted. Everyone has pagers now. The volunteer fire station is less than 100 yards from our bedroom windows. At all times of the day and night, its powerful siren cranks up to a sustained, nerve-jangling pitch, wakening babies and generally shattering the peace. Why should we put up with this blasted racket, he went on, when there was a non-disruptive alternative? Would I join him at the upcoming town meeting to help make his case? This was not just any neighbor, but the one we called the mayor of the block. Retired yet busy, Albert kept tabs on everyone. He was incredibly helpful, full of generous energy. The morning after any winter storm, there he would be, using his snowblower to clear the sidewalk on both sides of the block. Once, in the cold, without gloves, he took a saw to a tree that had fallen across our driveway, just so I could get to work. He was a person on whom I had come to rely. Now he was asking me for something, and I was going to have to refuse. It's funny, the things that push us to take a stand. Despite being in my neighbor's debt, despite Albert's genuine concern for the jangled nerves and wakened babies of our block, there was no way I could oppose the fire siren. I couldn't even give the sort of non-committal response that would allow him to think that I agreed, but alas, just couldn't make the meeting. I'm sorry, I said, I can't. My mother always told me that when I hear a siren, it means someone is in trouble and someone is going to help. And since neither of those people is me, the least I can do is stop and pray for them. To this, the mayor of the block had no response. though he may have added religious nut to his mental file on me. For decades now, the sound of a siren has prompted me to say a Hail Mary, but I can dash off a rote prayer without breaking my stride. While dog-sitting recently, however, I was humbled in this regard by a Springer Spaniel named Duncan. Upon hearing the siren, while trotting happily along on a walk, Duncan froze, shot me a perplexed look, then threw back his head and howled. Pure instinct, no doubt, but to me it looked like the sort of full-throated prayer the situation actually deserved. Each day contains countless opportunities to raise our minds and hearts to God, especially once we decide to notice a thing, the coo of a mourning dove, or the whistle of a train, a glimpse of a bright red poppy, or a postal worker on her appointed rounds, a rainbow in the sky, or one at our feet in sidewalk chalk. Prayer turns us toward God, like sunflowers to the light. Anything that invites us to pause can be as sacred as a cathedral door. Pray for me, we often say in times of trouble. I like to think of the fire siren as just that, our first responders' dashed-off plea as they race to someone's assistance. I'm glad the siren continues to disrupt my peace, so I can pray for theirs. And then the question is this: what prompts you to prayer now? Would you consider adding something else? It could be as ordinary as the dryer buzzer. Anything you choose can become your personal call to prayer, summoning you to mindfulness. The end.
That is beautiful, Christine.
Thank you.
And I have like so many paths of response. I have to I'm like trying to be orderly in my mind. One is that my great uncle, my Uncle Jimmy, who passed away of COVID, but he had volunteered for his fire department for over 50 years.
Whoa.
Yeah. And the volunteer firehouse was half a mile down the road from him and my Aunt Barbara's house, and was like an extension of the house that if there was a big family gathering, we would have it at the firehouse. My great aunt organized their Easter egg hunt every year for the community. And when he was buried, they retired his number and did the final call for him on the radio.
Oh.
Which
wow.
was beautiful.
Oh, I just got
heartbreaking.
Chills. Yeah.
But our holiday meals at his house were always interrupted by the red phone, because he had been chief, and so it was a different phone. It was either a red phone or their house phone had a different ring when it was the volunteer fire department. Like when it was the alert going out. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure there was always a scanner running as well, just to keep everybody in the loop. So the idea of a siren, whether it's at the firehouse or an ambulance going by, being a trigger for prayer, I think is absolutely beautiful. So I thank you for that. Mm. And then it also makes me think of something that my rabbi, Rabbi Zedek, often says in his sermons and when he's teaching people about Judaism, that I think fits nicely here, is that one of the goals of prayer and of blessings, because there's a tradition in Judaism that you can or should say 100 blessings in a day.
I love the Jewish tradition of blessing the heck out of everything.
Yes.
I wish we had that tradition. Yeah.
Yeah. And what he always says is that saying a blessing makes the ho-hum aha.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. That it's taking something ordinary from your day and stopping to take notice of it. So it makes the ho-hum the aha. And that is what a blessing or something that triggers you to prayer can do. So those are the two things that immediately came to mind as you were reading.
That is nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I really feel like for me, it comes down to like anything can raise our minds and hearts to God once we decide to notice a thing. You know, because the noticing is sometimes the hard part. Because you know we can go through our days on such autopilot. So an example that I've been using this season, by which I mean the Lenten season, which will probably be over by the time this. Well, yes, that will be over by the time this
because
podcast
it's
drops.
Sunday and on
Right,
Sunday. Yeah.
Right. But one of the examples I've been giving is that we have mourning doves in our neighborhood, and for a long time. That just reminded me of my grandmother because she had mourning doves in the pine tree outside her kitchen window for many years. But then I was on the retreat leadership team for my parish back in 2019, like very, very briefly before the pandemic started. And we used the Beatitudes from Matthew's Gospel as the big theming, structuring thing for the retreat. And one of the Beatitudes is, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." So what I have been trying to do is when I hear the mourning dove to recite that scripture verse. And there's like a continuum because like, okay, I hear the bird and recite the verse, which may or may not actually lead me to pray for those who mourn, you know, but if it does, you know, you can hear the bird quote the verse, actually pray. The next step is, you know, bird, verse, pray. Actually call to mind people I know who are mourning. And then on a really exceptionally integrated day, maybe reach out to one of those people, you know, call, text, drop a card, you know, so that there can be that whole arc of something very commonplace actually moving us to mindfulness and then to action.
Right.
There's a similar, I'm not all about the birds, but there's also woodpeckers in the neighborhood. And I try to let that remind me of people who are doing hard things or who have hard jobs, you know, and to at least pray and possibly reach out to one of them.
Yeah. It sounds like a practice. My friend, Rabbi Rebecca Shore, who is in your neck of the woods in the Lehigh Valley, there's a prayer in Judaism called the Shehekianu, which is a prayer where you thank God for, it's a prayer that we say, it's a blessing, when something happens for the first time in the season. And you're thanking God for bringing us to this moment in time. And she will often, as people are, you know, so if you're having a group of people to dinner at your house and it's the first time you've all been together in this formation, you might say the Shehekianu, or it's the first night of a holiday, or it's the first woodpecker of the season, the first mourning dove of the season, the first daffodil, the first fruits of the season. But she's really good in finding Shehekianu moments throughout the day. Whereas other people might only use it for like big tentpole moments.
Sure.
And it's about making it a practice of noticing, of noticing.
Yeah. Because you're going to eat the first local strawberry at some point. You know, I mean, I think we you know, we're not total locavores here, but we try, you know, to eat locally when we can, which means, you know, there will be strawberry season and asparagus season and apple season, you know, which is just wonderful to just call to mind the cyclical nature of everything.
Yeah. Did you grow up in a Jesuit parish, or did you come to, I don't totally know all the right Catholic words to use.
There's a vocabulary issue,
Yeah. Did you grow up with Jesuit priests? Was that like where your family went, or was that something you found as an adult?
It's something I found starting in college.
Okay.
The Jesuits are known best probably for their colleges and good basketball teams thereof.
Loyola, St. Louis University.
Right. So St. Peter's, who made it to the Elite Eight this year.
Yep.
You know, that was like the the underdog or whatever you call that
Yeah.
team. But yeah, so they're Jesuits tend to name their schools. Sometimes it's the Loyolas, but it's also like Boston College and Georgetown and big schools with good basketball teams.
Yes.
But so I went to St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia for undergrad, and then to Boston College for grad school. I was raised Catholic. I mean, my mother was a high school theology teacher. My dad had been a seminarian before he came out and became an accountant and then a teacher and married my mother, slightly out of chronological order. But so, going to a Jesuit college was sort of my first exposure to all things Ignatian. And as part of campus ministry, we went to the Jesuit Spiritual Center at Wernersville, which I know your listeners can't hear, but this picture is from the cloister walk there.
Okay.
And I wound up going on retreat there for 34 years. I think it just closed for good last August, which is, tragic, and many of us are still dealing with that. But really, 34 years, that was my place that I went, for weekends, for days, for a week-long retreat. So I really credit that with my ongoing formation in, speaking Ignatian and praying in Ignatian fashion. And, my Jesuit formation continued well beyond the schooling.
Yeah. I mean, what I know about Jesuit practice, or at least the colleges, because my first job out of college was I went into student housing. So I was an RA in undergrad, and then I was a hall director after I graduated for a couple years, and I interviewed at a couple Jesuit schools. I also converted to Judaism in my 20s, so I was kind of like a agnostic, secular Christian. But I remember that the Jesuit schools had a practice of community service and social justice baked into their education that I didn't see at other colleges. So that was kind of like what stood out to me about Jesuit schools was a really active community service, but like beyond basic volunteering. Service learning, I think, is what it was called at the time.
So there's a couple. I when I started working at a Mercy-sponsored college, I said I was so frustrated by the way the Jesuits had cornered the market on so much good language, because Jesuits were known as men for others, and of course now that the colleges are all co-ed, men and women for others is one key phrase, or contemplatives in action is another key phrase that sort of captures that idea that, like, yes, we are deeply prayerful people, but it's not just for the sake of sort of our own inner peace. It's so that we can go out, in service from there. The other thing that is kind of deeply Jesuit is this idea of praying with the imagination. St. Ignatius in his spiritual exercises, and we're in what's called the Ignatian year right now, because we've just hit the 500th anniversary of the conversion of Ignatius. Okay. Conversion from apathetic Catholic to saint in the making.
Yes.
But he encourages us to put ourselves in a piece of scripture imaginatively. I always say the reason we know the scriptures were written by men is because you don't hear what anyone is wearing. But there's like such a dearth of detail.
Right.
And so to put ourselves in there imaginatively and think, like, what did it look like? What did it smell like? Like, what was going on in the background? What were the expression on people's faces? And to even imagine ourselves as one of the characters. It could be one of the main characters, or it could be a bystander or a skeptic, or, and just to really kind of flesh that out, with the understanding that what comes to us when we pray that way is not some sort of like mystical certainty about what really happened, But what comes to us is something that is for our own benefit spiritually. Some insight, some consolation, some drawing closer to God, some, kick in the pants, that is for us and that could be for other people. So one of the things that I do on a regular basis, I have these dramatic interpretations of women in scripture that I do, when I lead a retreat or I, lead an evening of reflection. I think I have about 5 of them that I do right now with 2 more written out, but not, put in good shape yet. All of which come from spending time in that sort of imaginative Ignatian prayer with particular gospel stories, and getting to then tell the story from that woman's perspective as though she were talking to you today. So sort of a contemporary vocabulary and, a little sassy sometimes. And so that's, part of that fruit of the Jesuit upbringing.
Yeah. So you have written some of those dramatic, imaginative stories of what it would have been like to be there. When if a Jesuit priest is leading you in imaginative prayer, are they also giving you like a story that they have imagined, or are they saying, is it a personal prayer, or is it a mass prayer? Like the prayer that's happening in the church, or prayer that's happening at home while you pray solo prayer?
That is a fantastic question. So first of all, it's not necessarily a Jesuit. It could be, but like my spiritual director is a woman she's been my spiritual director for 20 years. So for example, if I was on retreat back at the Jesuit Center, back when it existed, I would, let's say I was doing a 7-day silent retreat.
Okay.
And it would be silent except for there would be mass each day, and I would go for a session of spiritual direction, so an hour with her, with Susan, once a day. And we would talk about what had happened in my prayer the previous day, and then we would talk about some ideas for how I might pray in the day ahead, with the idea that there would be sort of discrete periods of prayer throughout the day. So she might say, what if this afternoon, what about praying with the woman at the well? And so, I might pray with the story of the woman at the well in the afternoon, but in the morning, maybe I sort of get warmed up by praying, a scripture passage about thirst, a psalm about thirst, as the deer, all. So she would make some suggestions, and then in my own solo personal prayer time, I would kind of immerse myself and pray from there.
Yeah. Now here's something I've learned this year. This is like a COVID learning, I guess, a TikTok learning, is that some people can hear and see in their mind's eye. Some people can hear, some people can only see, and some people don't see and hear in their mind's eye.
Ooh,
so when you are doing solo prayer, do you hear it in your head, or are you writing it down, or do you have to say it out loud to experience it?
Ooh, that's an awesome question. I would say that I'm seeing and hearing in my head. And because Ignatius was very much in favor of writing down one's prayer experiences after they happened.
Okay.
So that it's not a creative writing exercise, but that it's a prayer exercise that then sort of bears fruit in the writing of it. Yeah. I would say that part of what is the other piece of my background that makes this part of my life now. I often say that I was an English major and a drama geek before I was a theology major and a campus ministry geek.
Okay.
You'll notice which piece stayed consistent.
Yeah.
So I really, having that like literature and theater background, I think helps me to sort of, imagine the scene.
Sure.
Even just yesterday. So we're recording this on a Sunday. Two of us sang for our vigil mass last night, and for our closing song, as we were practicing right before mass started, I was like, okay, here's what I think we should do. Like, Jim, on the piano player, why don't you just give us a chord? Christina, that's you and I, sing it a cappella dramatically. Like, get your face out of the book. We're just gonna, follow me. We're gonna do it dramatically. And then, Jim, you play it. And then we'll sing it once with the piano and the congregation. And then, Jim, you just play it out. And Christina's like, wow, you're really like, I said, yeah, my mother used to say that she thought that I thought of myself as the stage manager for mass. So yeah, like I often say God wastes nothing. And this would be an example of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So is that, because you did say your spiritual director has been a woman, and so you were helping lead a vigil mass, a mass vigil.
A vigil mass, yes. It just means the night before.
Okay. Because today is Palm Sunday. We're recording this on Palm Sunday.
We are.
Okay. So are you at a Catholic, is that happening at a Catholic church with a priest, or is that happening in like a lay-led church situation?
It's my parish, St.
Okay.
Vincent de Paul in the Germantown neighborhood of Philadelphia. So it's a parish with a Vincentian priest,
Okay.
several Vincentian priests and a brother who work at the parish.
Okay. Yeah, we have DePaul University here, so
Yes.
I'm familiar with the name at least.
Yes, them's us.
So. Okay. And then they know that you and Christina and your piano player, you're in charge of the music, and then they are surprised and delighted when they get a dramatic a cappella. Or are you near enough to them to be like, just hold back a minute?
Oh, no, they're just, yeah. They just get what they get. As my brother
Wonderful.
says, they get what they get and they don't get upset.
That is a very different, you're right, a very different cantor relationship than we have in our congregation.
Yes. Often when I tell Jewish people that I'm a cantor, they're like, what?
Yeah.
Like, no. Same word, kind of same function. Not really.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's fantastic. I feel like I must have had some pent up Catholic questions and I'm getting them all answered today.
Nice.
Now, we had also talked before we hit record that from fire sirens, that is something that you choose to allow you to call, that it calls you to prayer. Is the book, are the other 27 meditations other moments that you identify as in the world of fire sirens, or are there other things that you use as meditation, that's kickoffs to meditations?
I can tell that you ask questions for a living. These are great questions.
Thank you.
No, more the latter. So the book is divided. I feel like I have to back up. My first book talked about 4 what I called terrains where we could notice the presence of God.
Okay.
So I talked about finding God in the wonders of the created world, in surprising encounters with strangers, in disorienting experiences of travel, and in poignant moments of life transition. So it was all kind of like 4 out there terrains. This one I talk about 4 movements that we go through in our life. And so I call them perceiving, becoming, embracing, and releasing. And thank you. When I talk about that, I say, so perceiving, we awaken to the world around us, and that's the section in which the fire siren story was. We discover and rediscover our path. We practice love in its many forms, and we grieve the loss of much that we hold dear. So each of the 7 reflections in those sections sort of circle around those themes. So So this first one is about, noticing things. Fire siren is one of them. But I open with a story called Finding God Without Glasses that is about my Aunt Eileen's effort to teach her grandson to read. And how he at one point got really frustrated with her and said, "Why don't you just give me your glasses and then I'll be able to read?"
Oh.
Because what do women of a certain age say? I can't read a thing without my glasses.
Right. And they are called reading
glasses. Like, why the heck was she trying to teach him to read the hard way?
Right.
But then I go on to talk about like reading as a metaphor and like what are the, we need to read our boss's mood. The preachers need to read the room to know when to wrap it up, or at least should. There's all kinds of things we need to be able to read. So that's the perceiving section. In the becoming section, it's interesting. The becoming section is the only one where every single story is about myself. Because it's the only one where all the stories are in chronological order. I start with 8th grade, like my 8th grade retreat, and how I suddenly had this insight that I was supposed to be a nun.
Okay.
And I was not happy about this. So it goes from there through, figuring out, coming to campus ministry because I got a crush on a guy in college who was into campus ministry, who I never ever dated, but he got me there. There's a story about my time as a hospital chaplain, a story about my time as an executive secretary when I couldn't find a campus ministry job. And so here I am, like a graduate trained theology person, like working as a secretary at US Healthcare. I talk about a difficult ministry placement. I talk about living alone after my marriage broke up. I talk about trying to fix a broken pipe when I was a tenant with 2 cats. I think you can relate to this.
Yes.
But 2 illegal cats. And yeah.
So how do you? Yes.
Right. Yeah. And the chapter.
I think many of us with cats have had that situation where you're like, I guess I'll fix it myself because otherwise, how am I going to keep the cat secret from the super?
Right. Yeah. The chapter begins. The biggest problem with having unauthorized cats is that you can't call the landlord. Though I have been known to throw them into a duffel bag once.
Yeah.
Into a duffel bag and into my car.
Yeah.
They were not happy.
I'm sure.
So that's the chapter that goes through, just all stories about me chronologically. And then the embracing chapter is about like different experiences of love, none of which is romance. But how do we love our friends? How do teachers show love? How do we love through our kindness, through our, here's one, finding God in good questions. That's one you could relate to.
Yes.
That one's about my brother-in-law, who back when John was just my brother's new boyfriend, we wound up on a kind of a long car trip together, just the 2 of us. And he knew that our parents had died of cancer, and he knew that my partner, Porter, had cancer at the time and still does. And John said, we're driving from Philly to Baltimore, and John said, so, how is having a partner with cancer different from having had parents with cancer? So this is,
Who was driving? You or him?
He was driving.
Okay. I'm like, that's a big question to ask someone also in charge of the steering wheel.
Right. But it got us halfway to Baltimore, what a good question. And it, that really is, he is not a softball questions kind of guy. You're going to talk to John, you're going to have a conversation.
Yeah.
And, and it really kind of raised the bar because it made me want to ask him good questions too.
Right.
And, so, and then the chapter on releasing, grieving things, just talking about a lot of things that we need to let go of and say goodbye to, and, talk about my parents' deaths and cleaning out their house. And I loved that in the podcast of yours that I listened to most recently is your most recent one when you and your guest talked about that. And I was so relating.
Deborah talking about cleaning out her parents and then her ex-husband who had died by suicide, of having so many homes to clean out and the impact of that.
Yes. My mother died 7 years before my father, and my father was on home hospice for 8 weeks, and my brother and I moved back in to take care of him as he was dying, which gave us the gift of having 8 weeks to start cleaning the house out.
Yep.
And to really just go through, all kinds of things. But like, for example, when we sold my grandmother's house, there were things my mother just took that she, couldn't part with or didn't have time to go through.
Right.
And so when we cleaned out my parents' house, like one of the things we found, there was a box. When my mom was 13, she had a baby brother who died of crib death. And so we found a box that had 2 sets of cards. Congratulations on your baby boy cards and condolence cards. Oof. Right. We found those cards in 2014, and my mom's brother died in 1954 or early 55. Now, it's not like the family spent every day deciding, I am not going to throw out those cards today.
Right.
They wound up in a closet or, under a bed or, know. But there they were. I don't know when the right time to throw them out was. I'm thinking it was sooner,
Right. Right.
But yes, so I share a very similar sentiment to your previous guest of like just wanting to not accumulate too many things. I would like to live more lightly in this world.
Yeah. Well, Christine, it sounds like an amazing book. I look forward to getting my hands on it when it is published in June, or when it is released in June.
Yeah, pre-orders available now.
Yes, people can pre-order. And I also noticed they can pre-order a signed, personalized copy. So there's time for people, if they want to give this as a gift. It will be a beautiful gift.
Indeed, yes. I'm a big believer in the local independent bookstore, and right down the corner from my house is the Open Book Bookstore. And,
wonderful.
It's a great local bookstore, and they're handling my pre-orders. I mean, you can order it through Barnes & Noble or Bookshop or IndieBound or that other one that starts with an A, which the Open Book actually has a swear jar if you use the A word.
Wonderful. I do my best to link to Bookshop pages for people, but since you have a special relationship, I'll link to your.
Well, and thank you. And that is the way. I mean, I will in the days leading up to Pub Day, I will, sign and personalize however many books we need to, and they will go out in the mail in a timely fashion. So.
Great.
Yeah.
Do you use social media? Do you want people to follow you online? Or?
Oh, that would be fantastic. So for all the socials, it's Christine-Marie Eberle.
Great.
Which is annoying as heck, I realize. But part of the problem with running it all together is that both my first name and my middle name end with the first letter of my last name. And it's just too many E's. If you run it all together, it's just too many E's. So Christine Marie Eberle with hyphens in there. But, that's my Facebook author page, and it's my Instagram. You can find me on LinkedIn. There's really nothing sensible to follow on Twitter unless you like my Jeopardy blind guesses.
Great. So people will find you on Facebook and on Instagram.
Goodreads.
I will link to it in the show notes, and I will tag you when the episode comes out as well. Is there anything about the book or finding these calls to prayer in everyday life, in ordinary times, that I haven't asked you about that you would be sad for us to hang up without mentioning?
Oh, thank you. I think the only other thing I would want to say, if we go all the way back to that accidental interfaith group of people who set me on this path. They talked about that the way I write is sort of like, Steve Eisner uses the word ambassador. I think I like the word translator. This is an ancient religious tradition. You and I both come from ancient religious traditions with very antiquated terminology. Yours is in Hebrew, mine is in Latin, in Greek, And I think that is something that can be off-putting for sort of regular people in the world, is that so much of this terminology feels musty and stiff and formal. And so I really try to take the things of faith and make it very accessible for people in the world today. And that is really what I am all about, whether I am, writing books or my blog or giving a retreat or an evening of reflection. I really want to make these things very relatable for people's real lives, because that's where God is to be found. And, if we just sound all stiff and churchy, that is not a way to draw people to us. I sometimes chuckle. There's a couple, so John's gospel sounds very different from the other three. And sometimes in it, Jesus gives these long theological discourses, which I find it very hard to believe he actually did. And like at one point he goes on and on and on and on. And then it says, and because he spoke this way, many people came to believe in him. And I think, really? Are you kidding me?
Right.
So I try to be, I try to present an accessible, fun, and hopefully, pretty true and resonant spin on the things of faith. So there you have it. Thank you for asking.
Yeah. So the book is Finding God Abiding, June 7th, 2022, available for pre-order now. You've got plenty of people have plenty of time to get a signed, personalized copy.
Would love to.
So Christine, thank you so much for joining me today. And best of luck with this season of launch. Thank you. And you know what? Okay, the one other thing that occurs to me we didn't mention. Yes. I also have a website. Yes. How about that? And again, with the hyphens, Christine-Marie-Eberle.com. Yes. They can sneak peeks at chapters there, as well as reading all kinds of other blog posts, magazine articles. If a listener is not sure whether or not they want to read me, if they go to my website, they will absolutely be able to figure that out without spending a dime. And they can see events that you have coming up, that some are in person, some are on Zoom. And if people want to bring you in for a retreat in person or in Zoom, there's information for that as well. Absolutely. Invite away. I travel and I do Zoom. Oh, great. It's nice to have the in-person retreat option available again, isn't it? It sure is. Yeah, there's nothing like the feedback that you get when you can see people face to face. Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Leah. This has been fun. The time flew.
Thank you for listening to Finding Favorites with Leah Jones. Please make sure to subscribe and drop us a 5-star review on iTunes. Now, go out and enjoy your favorite things.